Hello, and welcome to the Other Minds podcast. I'm Joseph Bohigian. Other Minds, founded in 1993 in San Francisco by Charles Amirkhanian and Jim Newman, is devoted to championing the most original voices in new and experimental music. On Season 2 of the podcast, we're talking with the featured composers from our 27th Other Minds Festival, which will take place November 14th to 19th, 2023 at the Taube Atrium Theater in Gray Area in San Francisco. Today, I'm joined by Eivind Buene. Buene is a Norwegian composer living and working in Oslo, where he is professor of composition at the Norwegian Academy of Music. Apart from writing music for soloists, ensembles, and orchestras, Buene also frequently engages in collaborations with improvising musicians, developing music in the cross-section between classical notation and improvisation. In addition to music, Buene writes critiques, essays, and novels, and is exploring hybrid forms between music and text in large-scale orchestral works. Welcome to the podcast, Eivind.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
What is your relationship with the music of the past? You've written, there's obviously a multitude of frictions in the relation between historical material and engagement in the now, and that this friction motivates your own artistic practice.
Yeah, it does in several ways. One way is that when you work with an institution like a symphony orchestra or that kind of, you work in that kind of space, there's so much energy there from the past, I feel. So as a composer, it's a little bit like exhibiting your work. I mean, if you were a painter in a room full of old masters, and working in the concert hall with the symphony orchestra, for instance, that would devote 95% of their time to old repertoire. It's this energy. So I feel when I enter that kind of space with my music, I need to engage with that. I need to work with that energy in some way, and I cannot wish it away. It's not. I can't wish it was a white cube in a way. It has all these energies. So that's one part of it. Another part of it, well, when I work with more kind of new music institutions, let's say festivals or new music ensembles specialized on new music, I don't that often engage with the old. Sometimes I do if I want to, let's say, investigate what is chamber music, what is this room that we gather in without conductor in a kind of level playing field with musicians where anything can happen. But of course, in classical music, very often we know very well what's going to happen. So sometimes I contact old music as a way to try to in a way discuss that room, if you see what I mean. But there's also another thing about the past that I think as composers, when we deal with the past, we transform the listening experience of the audience. But in a way, not only does the past shine into the present, but in a way we also transform the past. I can give you one instance. One example is Berio as a piece, Sinfonia, which is a big orchestral piece, kind of early postmodern work, where one of the movements he takes a full scherzo from Mahler's Second Symphony, and he writes his own stuff on top of that, and that Mahler scherzo just rolls on. And now I can never hear that Mahler without also hearing Berio in my head, in a way. So that's some entrances to, well, working with the past in this way.
Could you talk about what you call a telescopic mode of listening?
Yeah, I think there's sometimes we talk about the past and we talk about the present, like this kind of dichotomy, or like there's two points in time. But for instance, I have a project I call Schubert Lounge, where I sing Schubert songs in my very own way. I transform them. I sing with my untrained voice, more like a pop singer. I also grew up with popular music, not with classical music. So that's kind of my natural mother's tongue as a singer. And then I accompany myself with a Fender Rhodes electric piano. So this singer-songwriter posture that I then developed there is a kind of a image from the 60s and 70s. The Fender Rhodes was, in a way, the Steinway of the singer-songwriter. So when I perform these Schubert songs, I mean, I do it in the now, in the present, wherever I am doing it. And of course, it also says something about Schubert's songs, but it's also nodding to this whole tradition of popular music from the 60s and 70s. And when we think about the songs of Schubert, we can think about a great tenor standing with a grand piano, with a big audience, really singing on the top of his voice, the way we've been used to from the 20th century way of performing classical music. But the original context of Schubert's work was often he would play himself. He was a singer-songwriter in a way, to a small audience, maybe in a loft in Vienna or in a house of his friends. So I'm interested in history as this kind of, that's the telescopic idea, that it has all these lenses that you can see through, which makes it much more interesting than just focusing on the present and some point in the past.
What is your method of transformation, if we can call it that, in the Schubert Lounge songs? For one, they're in English in your version. What else are you transforming?
Initially, I tried to sing them in German, but then it, for me, didn't get in touch with pop music the way I wanted it to do, because I mean, English is the Esperanto of pop music in a way, all over the world. That's the language that people use for that. So but the transformation process is really about listening to the Schubert original songs with different singers and different recordings. Sometimes sitting by the piano playing them myself. I'm not a very good pianist, but I do what I can. And then trying to catch some phrase or some kind of gesture that stays with me and that I can immediately transform with my own voice. So it's a very physical thing. I sit down and I start to sing it. And if it's a beautiful phrase and I can imagine, I can work with this, but if I can't really sing it the way I want, then I can't do it. So it's very different from, I mean, my training as a composer and my 25 years of working professionally as a composer. It's where I work with other people's bodies, and I, as a composer, you kind of direct other people's actions on their instruments and the conductor's movements and all that. So you're kind of working very intimately with other people's bodies, but from far away. So this was really about turning that process on myself and developing this and transforming these songs through my own body. So it's more a physical thing than a mental or intellectual thing for me. I sing them, and if I feel that that it sits with me in a good way, then yeah. And then, of course, some of the songs I can sing almost verbatim the Schubert, but just rephrase it. But some of the songs, maybe there's some great Schubert phrases that I like, but then maybe that song takes a different route, and I need to transform that. And maybe more than half of the material would be my own. And sometimes in extreme cases, maybe that's just a fragment of Schubert. So this way of working is a very different way than I would, let's say, for instance, with a symphony orchestra, where I don't engage bodily in the same way.
Yeah, and I mean, the Schubert Lounge project has expanded into different, perhaps more chamber music-y versions as well. Could you talk about that further level of transformation?
Yeah, absolutely. It's it started just as an experiment. I'm sitting now in my loft here in Oslo where I work, and I wanted to kind of recreate the original context of some of these songs. So I invited friends over here and said, I'll play you some Schubert my very own way. And then I made a vinyl with 4 tracks on it. So it was really just a side thing, but a lot of people really enjoyed it. And then a very good classical baritone came to me and said, I dig your stuff. Can we do something together? So then I started composing a work where I would compose more kind of new music stuff for him to sing. And he would also sing some original Schubert. And we brought a soprano into it, and I do my Schubert Lounge. So that's a full evening with a chamber ensemble. And also I have other musician friends that are excellent performers, like Jakob Kullberg, Danish cellist, great cellist, but he also likes to sing. And then he heard my stuff and said, can you write something for me where I can sing and play the cello? And so we ended up doing some stuff together, and I wrote a set of songs for him based on Mahler. So yeah, it's kind of, I'm not the only person in the classical world that likes to sing just with the untrained voice.
Are you the same bright river that gaily rushed along? How still you are and silent, no greeting in your song. You no longer rushing, your surface hard and sealed. How cold you lie unmoving, stretched across the field. I'll carve into your surface the name I can't forget the name of my beloved, the day and hour we met, the day of our first meeting, the day we had to part. Her mind and time, but round it all I'll carve a broken heart. My heart within this river. You know yourself so well beneath this icy cover, the raging torrent swell. You know yourself so well, my heart within this river. You know yourself so well beneath its icy cover, the raging torrent swell. You know yourself so well. You know yourself so well.
You've started to mention orchestral music. It's a genre which is, of course, laden with historical implications. Can you talk a bit more about how you're approaching these ideas with the orchestra?
Oh, yeah. That's, to me, a more abstract thing. For instance, I was to write a violin concerto for a violinist who performs a lot of new music, especially worked a lot with the late Kaja Saariaho. But still, in a way, I couldn't imagine a violin concerto without Alban Berg's violin concerto kind of popping up in my head, because it's a kind of proto piece, has a very early example of postmodern music in the sense that he quotes the Bach choral, Es ist genug, in that piece. So that's also a telescopic listening there, that when I listen to Berg, I also listen to Berg listening to Bach. So for me, it wasn't a way to get around that. I needed to kind of touch base with Berg in some way, and towards the end there are some quotes there, and it's difficult with this quote thing because I don't want it to be just a signal to the audience that's like, say, hey, we're in a big tradition here, and oh, you might like this and you've heard this before, so please listen to my music. It's not about that, but it's more about when you write a violin concerto, it's like it's a genre with so much. Yeah, like I said earlier, it's so heavily laden with connections already. The sound of it comes with the world, and so maybe I would just feel naive if I didn't kind of acknowledge that and work with that personally. That's for me personally, I think. Yeah, and there's one more thing about Alban Berg when I was writing the violin concerto, because then 5 years prior to that, I'd published my first novel. And in that novel, one of the main characters is a violinist preparing to play the Berg violin concerto. So I really thought a lot about how to fictionalize kind of a performance of Berg violin concerto. A novel is also a great place to think about and to kind of discuss and to criticize the world of classical music and to celebrate it, because you can make up fictional characters that do all kinds of things. So when it was time for me to write my violin concerto, I had already done this kind of legwork with Berg, which is, I think, also a reason why it became impossible to not take that into the work.
You mentioned that you're also a novelist in addition to being a composer, and you've described searching for hybrid forms in which text and music are equally important and dependent on one another. Can you talk about this idea in relation to your piece Blue Mountain?
Yeah, Blue Mountain is the first piece where I wrote a kind of live audio play in a way. It's for two actors and orchestra, and the actors, they're sitting on like audience chairs but on stage, like if the soloist plays. So the audience would soon understand that they're part of the audience, and we start listening to their conversation. And then they talk about a relation, and they talk about the music that they hear, and they talk about the past. And that's, of course, then you can make a situation when they are listening to the orchestra, which is playing right behind them, and discuss what they're playing. And then you can throw all of these old pieces into that mix. But there was especially one piece that was important for me, and that was the Mahler song, Ich bin den Welt abhanden gekommen. Because the text there is very, the poet there, Rickert, talks about, I have left the world is now behind me, I'm alone in my heaven, in my art. So it's a kind of strange, is this the kind of guy who kind of escaped into art, or is it a suicide note, or what is this poem? And to me, that Mahler song that's the most beautiful song in the world. Yeah, so the conversation that the two actors have, the story behind it in a way is inspired by that Rickert text that Mahler uses. And of course, then the Mahler fragments start showing up in the music. So in a way, that Mahler song inspired both the textual writing, but also the musical writing. Yeah, but textually, it's not clear. It's on a rather profound level, but it's when you know it, it's really there.
Do you feel like you were successful in elevating the elements of text and music to the same level, or what did you learn from that process?
Yeah, it's a constant work that I'm in the process of it right now, because in 6 weeks we have a premiere of a new work in the same genre with another orchestra and 2 different actors, where I could try again and fail better, perhaps. No, but what I learned is some really banal things. That, for instance, there were a part where I wanted the actors to keep talking. I've written a long dialogue, but the orchestra was supposed to overpower them, so the audience wouldn't hear the words. They were just, maybe some fragments. But the actors were really, really skeptical to that. They were like, if we are sitting on a stage and talking, people must hear us. I said, trust the music. The music will tell the story. And they were just, no. So I had to let that idea go. And another, banal insight is how much power there is in a symphony orchestra when you sit there up with them just in front of the first violins. Because what I'm aiming for in terms of dramatic dialogue, I want something very naturalistic, more akin to a film dialogue. So they use closed mics, and we position loudspeakers down the hall so that they wouldn't have to really project their voices like theater acting. But still, when the orchestra starts to play loud, they believe that they need to project their voices to the last stage, the seat of the audience. So these are technical things. But what I also learned, I think, wanting to elevate music and text to the same level is, at certain points, you need to, like I said, trust the music to tell the story. And not everything needs to be spelled out. And also, the biggest threat is that music just starts floating into the background. So in the text, I put in kind of textual pointers where the actors would say, listen to this. You remember this piece? You remember we were at that? Yeah. And also, so they also say that in a way to the audience implicitly, listen to this. So I try to weave that into the dialogue in a natural way. I'm not sure if I always succeed. Yeah. So those are a few insights. But this is, for me, it's a developing work. I hope I can do. I would really like to do a piece with choir and actors, kind of smuggle actors into the choir, and then the choir starts becoming a kind of a stage. So it's something I will really continue to work on.
De har nettopp begynt.
Hva spiller de?
Jeg vet ikke, aldri hørt det før.
Er du kjent med den? Nei, bare glem det.
Så fint at du svarte. Det hadde jeg ikke ventet. Du ser godt ut da. Har jo ikke blitt et år eldre.
Nei, jeg har jo ikke det.
Fint at vi kunne møtes her.
Ja. Nei, jeg har alltid likt meg på konsert, ja, men ja, det vet du jo.
Ja.
Jeg synes vi hører hverandre på en annen måte. Da.
Tiden blir liksom borte.
Synes du det?
Ja.
Nei, for meg er det helt omvendt. Jeg synes tiden blir sånn helt konkret. Den kommer, og så går den, og den kommer aldri tilbake.
Når jeg er på konsert, da mister jeg tidsfølelsen helt. Jeg drømmer meg bort og forestiller meg ting.
Hør på det her. Spilte den for deg?
Nei, når var det?
Shifting over to the upcoming performance at the Other Minds Festival, the Friction Quartet will be performing your 2006 string quartet Grid. Could you tell us about that piece?
Yeah, it's part of a big chamber music cycle called Possible Cities, Essential Landscapes. And at that time, every piece I wrote, I can tell you which novel or which book I was reading at the time because they kind of seep directly into my music. And for this chamber music cycle, it was Italo Calvino's Invisible Cities, which is a fictional meeting between Kublai Khan and Marco Polo, where they have a lot of philosophical discussions. And at this time in 2006, I was very, I would say, obsessed with the gestural qualities of music as a physical event, both in terms of how the musicians relate to their instruments, but also this kind of, I like this jerky, energetic quality that would almost try to make the audience move in their chairs, like bumping into them with the music. So there's a lot of fast energy in that music and rhythms and gestures that kind of bounce around a lot. And it's called Grid because in this cycle, the first half of the cycle is really about cities and kind of city noise, city life, and all the superposed grids in a city. I mean, we have the grids of the street, you have grids of water and drainage, and you have the grids of electricity and all these overlaid grids, and of course of human communication. So to me, the city is just this web of connections. And that was really something that I tried to, there was energy there. I tried to get into the music. And then later in the cycle, the pieces transform more to a more quiet, where the landscape becomes more important as an image for me. No, but I think the most important thing is that it's a very typical piece of mine from that time because of all this gestural energy.
And you've also written a new piece, which Friction will be premiering. How has either your composition in general or even just your string writing changed over those past 17 years since you wrote Grid?
Oh, I think a lot. I think when I wrote Grid, it was about imagining some kind of gestural energy and then trying to get the players to, in a way, act that or act that out. But in my present writing, especially for strings, it's much more about the latent quality of the instruments themselves, the fragility, the touch of the finger on the string, the bowing positions. And a quartet is really a beautiful and very, I mean, it can be so fragile and so brittle. At the same time, a good string quartet, maybe they've played together for 10 years, 20 years, something like that. And they're, I mean, it's like a super honed instrument for music. And so it's this duality by the virtuosity of the string players, but also trying to catch this fragility. And then to get that, I try to go really deep into the instruments themselves and let the music grow out of that, instead of kind of putting my grid, as it were, on the music. Yeah. And this piece, it's a very quiet piece. And I wrote it as I was approaching my 50th birthday. So actually the first final draft was finished on my birthday, my 50th birthday. And that's a time where, for me, living here in a rather quiet corner of the world in Scandinavia, and feeling very privileged in many ways. So it's a good time to take stock of that. It's also a time to look back on things. And one of the things I looked back on too was this, like in this music cycle, chamber music cycle that I was talking about. There's a lot of energy, but there's these pockets of quietude. And then I would look back to these pockets of quietude and put those center stage and really look into those and develop those and go into those in a way that I haven't done before. So it's maybe something that has been latent in my music that now, in this piece, Chorales, it's a series of rather simple harmonic structures that in some ways are always slanted or put askew, or there is some kind of collision and friction in it, because even though I like the quietude and want to explore this stretched out time spaces, for me it must always be some friction there. There must be no pun intended by the name of the quartet, but but truly the even in the most harmonious and beautiful passages, there must be friction. There must be some kind of counter weight. I can read something from Italo Calvino. I have his book here because this that's one thing I was thinking about. This is from a section where Kublai is speaking. Contemplating these essential landscapes, Kublai reflected on the invisible order that sustains cities, on the rules that decreed how they rise, take shape, and prosper, adapting themselves to the seasons, and then how they sadden and fall in ruins. At times, he thought he was on the verge of discovering a coherent, harmonious system underlying the infinite deformities and discords. And this kind of being on the verge of understanding a harmonious system that underlies something else, or that is in kind of conflict with itself, or something like that. I think that's something I often strive for, which is a difficult balancing act, because if the harmonious system becomes too obvious, then there's no mystery in it. Then the friction disappears. So in this piece, I'm maybe searching for those areas where the audience will feel, that there is a harmonious system that I can kind of touch and feel, but I can't totally grasp it. I can just kind of stretch my ears towards it. That's what I'm aiming for. Of course, now, since these are just notes on paper, we don't know if I managed to do that, but we will find out.
Great. I think that's a great place to end. You can hear the world premiere of Eivind Buene's Chorales and his string quartet Grid, performed by Friction Quartet at Other Minds Festival 27 on November 18th, 2023 at the Taube Atrium Theater in San Francisco. Thank you, Eivind, for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
This has been an episode of the Other Minds podcast. brought to you by Other Minds. Our 27th festival is November 14th to 19th, 2023 at the Taube Atrium Theater and Gray Area in San Francisco. Join us again next week.